Can you imagine a principal so cruel she'd force a student to perform a violin solo just to humiliate him? That's exactly what happened at Westridge High School, where Principal Veronica Stevens thought she could break Johnson Williams, a black student with no musical training, by thrusting a violin into his hands. "I don't play," Johnson protested, his voice trembling as she shoved the instrument at him. "Then I suggest you learn quickly," she sneered, her eyes glinting with malice, fully expecting to watch him crash and burn. Little did she know, Johnson was the son of a musical prodigy, and what unfolded next left the entire school stunned. A tale of cruel intentions flipped into a breathtaking triumph that'll tug at your heartstrings. The morning assembly dragged on, the air thick with monotony, as Principal Veronica adjusted her fancy designer glasses and swept her perfectly styled blonde hair behind her ear. Her sharp gaze scanned the auditorium like a hawk, hunting for any hint of trouble among the rows of students. Then she zeroed in on Johnson, standing at the back, leaning against the wall, his tall frame tense. "Mr. Williams." Her voice sliced through the room like a whip. Every head turned. "Why aren't you seated with your classmates?" she demanded. Johnson shifted, discomfort written all over him. "I can't sit down right now, Principal Stevens," he said quietly. Her lips twisted into a tight, mocking smile. "Can't or won't. This defiance is getting out of hand," she snapped, her heels clicking like gunfire as she marched toward him. Can you believe she'd dismiss his pain so coldly? Johnson lowered his voice, almost whispering, "Ma'am, my back is hurting real bad," but she cut him off, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "No excuses, Mr. Williams. We follow the same rules in the school community. No exceptions." His best friend, Aisha, shot a worried glance from her seat. She knew exactly why he couldn't sit, and so did everyone in Ms. Reynolds' third period class from the day before. Principal Veronica's eyes landed on a violin case propped against the wall next to Johnson. "What's this?" she asked, her tone dripping with suspicion. "I wasn't aware you were in the music program." "It's Aisha's," Johnson explained. "I'm just holding it for her until orchestra practice." A wicked smile spread across Veronica's face. Can you picture the glee in her eyes as she saw her chance to pounce? "Oh really? Since you think rules don't apply to you, maybe it's time to show off your musical talents. The spring concert is next Friday, and I'm adding you to the program. You'll play a solo." Snickers erupted around the auditorium. Everyone knew Johnson wasn't in any music classes. "But I don't play," he started, his voice cracking. "Then learn quickly," she shot back, her words laced with mockery. "Or would you rather have detention for the rest of the semester for your insubordination?" Johnson took the violin case, his face burning as laughter and whispers filled the room. "I expect a full 3-minute performance," Veronica declared, her voice booming. "Let this be a lesson to everyone about respecting authority." She strutted away, smug and satisfied, leaving Johnson frozen, clutching the case, staring at the floor. "What a joke," someone hissed. "Joe can't even read, let alone play music. How could they be so cruel?" As the assembly ended, students streamed out, some casting pitying glances, others smirking with amusement. Aisha rushed to his side, her eyes blazing. "She can't do this to you," she exclaimed. "She just did," Johnson replied, his voice hollow. "Just like Ms. Reynolds did yesterday. Nobody stops them." The pain in his back was nothing compared to the crushing weight of humiliation. That pain had started the previous day in Ms. Reynolds' English class. Johnson had arrived a minute late. His previous teacher had kept the class overtime, and found his usual seat taken. "Sit in the back," Ms. Reynolds barked without looking up. The only chair available was broken, a jagged metal piece jutting from the backrest. "Ms. Reynolds, this chair is—" He tried to explain, but she cut him off. "Sit down, Mr. Williams. You've disrupted my class enough. Can you imagine being forced to sit on a broken chair like that?" Johnson eased himself down, trying to avoid the metal. 20 minutes into the lecture, he shifted and winced as the sharp edge dug into his back. "Is there a problem, Mr. Williams?" Ms. Reynolds snapped. "The chair's broken. There's a piece of metal." "Always an excuse with you," she interrupted, storming down the aisle. "Stand up." When he did, she grabbed the chair and shoved it hard against him, forcing him back down. The metal pierced his shirt, slicing into his lower back. Johnson cried out, jumping up in pain. "How dare you disrupt my class again? To the principal's office now," she roared. But Principal Veronica was in a meeting, so Johnson waited, his back bleeding slightly until the final bell. Too ashamed to report it, he went home. That evening, his mother, exhausted from a double shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse, cleaned the wound when he finally told her. "We're calling the school right now," she insisted, her voice shaking with anger. "No, Mama, please," Johnson begged. "It'll only make things worse." "This isn't right, Johnson. They can't treat you like this." "They already did," he said quietly. "And they'll find another way to punish me if we complain." Reluctantly, she agreed to wait, applying antiseptic to the raw wound, her hands trembling with worry. "Your father wouldn't have stood for this," she murmured, her voice heavy with memory. Johnson barely remembered his father, who died when he was 7. A kind man with gentle hands and a warm laugh who'd sung him to sleep. That night, unable to lie on his back, Johnson found an old photo album. Inside was a picture of his father holding a violin. Had he really played? His mother saw him studying it and said softly, "He had natural talent, but he never got the chance to develop it. Too many jobs to support us." Johnson traced his father's smiling face. "I didn't know he played music," he said, stunned. "There's so much you don't know about your daddy," she replied, her eyes misty. "He would have taught you if he'd had the chance." Standing in the school hallway the next day, clutching Aisha's violin, Johnson couldn't stop thinking about that photo, about dreams cut short and talents buried. "What are you going to do?" Aisha asked, snapping him back to reality. His phone buzzed with a text from his mom. "How's your back? Need me to call the school?" He slipped it back into his pocket. She was already stretched thin, working long hours, worrying too much. He couldn't add to that. "I don't know," he admitted to Aisha. "I've never even touched a violin before today." Aisha grabbed his arm, her voice fierce. "I can help you. I've been playing since I was 6. In 10 days, he asked, shaking his head. That's impossible. She set me up to fail. That's the whole point. That evening, Johnson sat at the kitchen table, staring at the unopened violin case, the weight of the day pressing down. His mother bustled around, cooking dinner, her eyes flicking to him with concern. You haven't told me what happened at school, she said, setting a plate of steaming food in front of him. Johnson's gaze stayed on the case. Principal Stevens humiliated me in front of everyone because I couldn't sit during assembly, he blurted, the story pouring out. How she'd forced the violin on him, mocking his every protest. His mother's face darkened as she listened, her hands gripping the table. When he finished, she locked eyes with him. My boy, you've got two choices with people like Principal Stevens and Ms. Reynolds. Let them crush you, or rise so high they have to strain to see you. Which is it going to be? She asked, nodding at the violin case. Mama, I can't learn to play in 10 days, he cried. It's impossible. Nothing's impossible for a Williams. She shot back, her voice fierce. Your granddaddy couldn't read till he was 30, but he taught himself and became a preacher. Your father worked 3 jobs and still learned music on his own, but he never got to do anything with it. Johnson argued, frustration bubbling up. Exactly my point, she said, her voice softening but intense. He never got the chance, but you do. Right now, even if it came from their cruelty. His phone buzzed again. Aisha, have you opened the case yet? I can come over tonight. Aisha offered to teach me, Johnson told his mom, a flicker of hope in his voice. She smiled, her eyes warm. That girl's a blessing. Tell her to get over here. Can you believe the fire in Johnson's spirit as he faced an impossible challenge? Just an hour after his world turned upside down, there was Aisha, sitting across from him at the kitchen table, her eyes bright with determination. It's all about posture and position, she said, showing him how to hold the violin like it was an extension of his soul. Your back's gonna make this tough, though. Johnson winced, the sharp pain from his injury flaring as he tried to rest the instrument on his shoulder. This is hopeless, he groaned, frustration bubbling up. Hopeless? No way. Aisha shot back, her voice firm but warm. It's a challenge, sure, but you're not alone in this, Johnson. She gently placed his fingers on the strings, her touch steady. Just feel it for now. Don't stress about playing yet. The violin felt alien in his hands. Its smooth wood heavy and unfamiliar. But as he ran his fingers along its curves, something sparked inside him. Curiosity? Defiance? Maybe both. Principal Stevens wants you to crash and burn, Aisha said bluntly, her eyes narrowing. She's betting you'll either skip the concert or make a fool of yourself on stage. That's exactly what's gonna happen, Johnson muttered, his heart sinking. Not if we fight for it, Aisha insisted, leaning forward. You don't need to be perfect. Just good enough to make her jaw drop. From the doorway, Johnson's mother watched, her face a mix of pride and worry. Your father's first violin wasn't even a real one, she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of memory. It was a cigar box with strings he rigged up himself. But he played it till his fingers bled. Johnson's head snapped up. He did? He asked, stunned. She nodded, a faint smile breaking through. Music was in his soul, Johnson. Maybe it's in yours too. His mind raced back to that old photo of his father, to Principal Stevens' smug grin, to Ms. Reynolds shoving him onto that broken chair. All those times he'd been dismissed, underestimated, pushed aside. Could he turn their cruelty into something more? They're not expecting anything from me, he said slowly, a spark of resolve igniting. So anything I do is gonna shock them. Exactly. Aisha grinned, her excitement contagious. I've got a plan. Something simple but sounds impressive. Even if you nail just one piece, it'll prove they're dead wrong about you. Johnson carefully lifted the violin under his chin, ignoring the stab of pain in his back. Show me again where my fingers go, he said, his voice steady now. As Aisha guided his hands, he made a silent vow. Principal Stevens wouldn't break him, and Ms. Reynolds' cruelty wouldn't define him. I'm gonna practice every single day, he declared. Before school, lunch breaks after school, whatever it takes. Aisha nodded, her eyes shining. I'm with you every step. His mother watched, her heart swelling with pride even as worry lingered in her gaze. This isn't just about proving them wrong, Johnson, she said softly. It's about finding something in you they never cared to see. He drew the bow across the strings for the first time, and oh, what a sound. A harsh screeching wail that made them all cringe. But beneath the noise, there was something. A faint note, raw but real. Again, Aisha urged, her voice full of encouragement. Lighter with the bow this time. Johnson tried again, and the sound was a tiny bit better. 10 days, he said, determination hardening in his chest despite the ache in his back. 10 days to learn what takes most people years. His mother squeezed his shoulder gently, careful of his injury. If anyone can do it, it's you, my boy. The kitchen echoed with the scratchy sounds of his practice, each attempt rough but defiant, a rebellion against the limits others had forced on him. 10 days to turn humiliation into triumph. 10 days to show Principal Stevens and the whole school who Johnson Williams really was. For the next 3 days, Johnson poured his heart into practice, seizing every spare moment. Before dawn, he'd be up at 5 a.m., tiptoeing so as not to wake his mother, who'd often worked late shifts at the hospital. Calluses bloomed on his fingertips as he drilled the basic scales Aisha taught him. Could he really pull this off? During lunch, while other kids laughed in the cafeteria, he slipped into the empty science lab, thanks to Mr. Patel, the kind chemistry teacher who'd heard his story. Just don't shatter my beakers with those high notes, Mr. Patel teased, but his warm eyes showed he understood. On the third afternoon, Johnson's usual practice spot, a quiet courtyard behind the gym, was taken over by the track team. Where could he go now? Reluctantly, he headed to the music wing, hoping for an empty practice room. The halls were silent, most students long gone. He peeked through the small windows of each room until he found one that seemed empty, slipped inside, and started playing the simple melody Aisha had shown him, his focus razor sharp. He was so lost in the notes he didn't hear the door creak open. What do you think you're doing in here? A voice barked. Johnson spun around, nearly dropping the violin. Mr. Carter, the music teacher, stood there, his face caught between surprise and irritation. "I'm sorry, sir," Johnson stammered. "I thought no one was here. I just needed a place to practice." Mr. Carter's eyebrows shot up. "Practice? Since when are you in the music program?" Johnson hesitated, then spilled the truth. "I'm not, sir. Principal Stevens is making me perform at the spring concert as a punishment. I've got a week left to learn." Mr. Carter's expression softened, curiosity replacing his annoyance. "A punishment? Music should never be a punishment." "It is when they expect me to fail," Johnson said quietly, his voice heavy. Mr. Carter studied him for a moment. Then, "Can you believe it?" he asked. "What are you trying to play?" Johnson showed him the simple piece Aisha had taught. His fingers clumsy, the bow jerky, the sound barely music. Mr. Carter winced. "Your bow holds all wrong, and your posture's gonna hurt you more." Then he noticed Johnson's hunched stance. "Are you injured?" Johnson explained his back pain, leaving out Ms. Reynolds' name. "That makes this even tougher," Mr. Carter said. "But not impossible." He reached out. "May I?" Johnson handed over the violin, and Mr. Carter tuned it with ease, then played a simple scale that sounded like pure magic compared to Johnson's attempts. "Music takes years to master," he said, handing it back. "But with the right help, you can learn the basics fast." He paused, then made a choice that changed everything. "Show me what you've got so far." For 20 minutes, Mr. Carter watched, offering tips on form and technique as Johnson stumbled through. Despite the roughness, the teacher's face grew thoughtful. "You've got a good ear," he said finally. "You're picking up pitch instinctively. That's rare." "Is that good?" Johnson asked, hope flickering. "It's everything," Mr. Carter replied. "Technique can be taught, but that instinct? That's in your blood." He glanced at his watch. "I've got to go. But use this room till 5 p.m. Work on that bow hold like I showed you." As he turned to leave, Johnson called out, "Sir, is it possible to learn enough in a week to not totally embarrass myself?" Mr. Carter paused at the door. "With that attitude? Probably not," he said, but then his face softened. "But with the right mindset and help, who knows what you could do?" After he left, Johnson practiced until his back screamed and his fingers went numb. Had he gotten any better? He wasn't sure, but something had shifted deep inside. What started as a desperate bid to avoid shame was turning into something real, a burning desire to learn. The next afternoon, Johnson was shocked to find Mr. Carter waiting in the practice room. "Your bow hold's still off," the teacher said, shaking his head. "And you're leaning too much to compensate for your injury. You'll never get a clean sound like that." Johnson blinked. "You're helping me?" "Principal Stevens told the faculty about your special performance," Mr. Carter said, his tone dripping with disdain. "She was way too pleased with herself." Johnson's cheeks burned with anger and embarrassment. "I don't like music being twisted into a tool for humiliation," Mr. Carter went on, his voice firm. "It goes against everything I stand for as a musician and teacher." He pointed at the violin. "Show me what you practiced yesterday." Can you feel the intensity in that cramped practice room as Mr. Carter leaned in, his sharp eyes fixed on Johnson's trembling hands? For a full hour, he coached Johnson with a fierce patience, tweaking his technique and showing him how to shift his posture to ease the throbbing pain in his back. Unlike the venomous jabs of Principal Stevens or Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Carter's demands were laced with care, pushing Johnson to retry every mistake without a hint of cruelty. "Keep at it," he'd say, his voice steady but encouraging. As they wrapped up, he dropped a bombshell. "I studied with Itzhak Perlman at Juilliard, you know," he said, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "I had chances most people only dream of." Johnson's jaw dropped. "Why are you here teaching at Westridge instead of out there performing?" he blurted, curiosity burning. Mr. Carter's face softened, a wistful shadow crossing it. "Stage fright. It crushed my confidence," he admitted. "But teaching? That's where I found my true calling." He adjusted Johnson's elbow with a gentle nudge. "Life takes you on unexpected paths, Johnson. Don't you ever forget that." Over the next few days, their afternoon sessions became a lifeline. Mr. Carter picked Bach's Minuet in G, a piece simple enough for a beginner but so captivating it could fool any untrained ear into thinking it was pure magic. "This has melodies people will recognize and love," he explained, breaking it into bite-sized chunks for Johnson to tackle. "Even if your technique's rough, the emotion will hit them right in the heart." Johnson soaked it up like a sponge, practicing until his back screamed and spasms forced Mr. Carter to call for breaks. "Take it easy," the teacher would insist, but something incredible was happening. Those once jarring notes started to flow, smoother, more natural, and his fingers? They were finding their place with a confidence he didn't know he had. On the 5th day, Mr. Carter's eyes lit up. "You've got real talent, Johnson," he declared. "With proper training, you could be a fine musician." Johnson shook his head, doubt creeping in. "This is just to survive the concert." "Is it, though?" Mr. Carter challenged, leaning closer. "I see something more when you play. Something you haven't even noticed in yourself yet." Before Johnson could argue, the door flew open, and there stood Principal Veronica Stevens, her face twisting from surprise to icy rage. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know you were running private lessons," she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. "Just helping a student prepare for the performance you assigned." Mr. Carter replied coolly, unflinched. Her eyes narrowed to slits. "How noble of you, but don't fill Mr. Williams' head with false hopes about his abilities." "On the contrary," Mr. Carter said, his tone firm as steel, "I'm giving him a fair shot to succeed." Her smile was cold, never reaching her eyes. "Well, don't let me interrupt your little tutorial. 5 days till the concert, Mr. Williams. I can't wait to see it." She turned to leave, then tossed over her shoulder. "Oh, and the school board will be there. No pressure." Johnson's hands shook as he sat, the violin trembling in his grip. "She's setting me up to crash in front of everyone who matters," he whispered, panic rising. "Or," Mr. Carter said softly, placing a steady hand on his shoulder, "she's giving you a stage to show them something they'll never expect. Don't play for her, Johnson. Play for you." Word of his performance spread like wildfire through Westridge High. In the hallways, whispers followed him. Some kids offered encouragement, others snickered. waiting for a flop. Ms. Reynolds, ever the thorn in his side, kept calling on him in class, hoping to trip him up. I hope your music obsession isn't tanking your grades, Mr. Williams, she'd say with a thin, smug smile, clearly annoyed when he answered correctly. Could she be any more obvious? Johnson stayed focused, his world narrowing to the violin. With Mr. Carter's guidance, his progress was electric. The teacher was floored when Johnson nailed a tricky passage after hearing it just once. That's unreal, Mr. Carter exclaimed. Most students need dozens of tries to get that right. Johnson shrugged, a bit sheepish. I can't read the music well yet, but when I hear it, I just feel where the notes go. Mr. Carter nodded, a spark of realization in his eyes. You're playing by ear. A gift even trained musicians envy. That became their game plan. Instead of wrestling with sheet music in the little time they had, Mr. Carter leaned into Johnson's natural ear, playing bits of the Bach piece for him to echo, building up to longer sections. The audience won't care if you're reading or not, he said. They'll just hear the music. By week's end, Johnson could play the first half of the minuet in G with solid skill. Not perfect, but the raw, honest emotion in his playing. Even Mr. Carter was moved. Something special's happening here, he said after a killer session. You're tapping into the music's soul in a way that takes years to learn. Johnson brushed off the praise, uneasy. I'm just trying not to bomb. No, Mr. Carter insisted, his voice intense. You're not just playing notes. You're saying something. The weekend before the concert, Aisha stopped by, her eyes wide as Johnson played through the piece. Johnson, that's incredible, she gasped. How'd you learn so fast? Mr. Carter's been amazing, he said, a little embarrassed. He says I've got a good ear. Good ear? This is unreal, Aisha exclaimed. You've learned in days what took me months. His mother, listening from the kitchen doorway, wiped a tear away. You sound just like your father, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. That night, as Johnson tucked the violin away, a new feeling warmed his chest. Pride. What started as a desperate dodge from humiliation had become something deeper, tying him to a part of himself he never knew existed. Monday morning, 3 days before the concert, Principal Stevens' voice crackled over the intercom, laced with mockery. Don't forget, our spring concert features a special solo by Johnson Williams, she announced. I urge everyone to come see this unique performance. During lunch, as Johnson practiced in his usual spot, he felt eyes on him. A group of orchestra kids stood at the door. Is it true you learned to play in just 2 weeks? One asked, amazed. Johnson nodded, uneasy. Can we hear something? Another begged. Hesitantly, he played the opening of the Bach piece, and their jaws dropped. That's actually really good, said a cellist. You sure you've never played before? Positive, Johnson replied. You've got serious talent, she said. We heard this was a punishment, but it doesn't sound like one. Their words lingered as they left. The violin, once so strange, now felt like part of him. The music, once just notes to memorize, carried emotions he couldn't voice. That afternoon, Mr. Carter sat at the piano, a thoughtful look on his face. The Bach piece is great, he said. But what if we switch it up for the concert? Switch it up? We've only got 3 days. Johnson protested, panic flaring. I know, but hear me out. Mr. Carter played a complex melody on the piano, something new and haunting. Can you play that back? Johnson lifted the violin, hesitated, then nailed it with surprising accuracy. Mr. Carter grinned. I knew it. Your gift isn't just pitch. It's a deep musical instinct. He handed Johnson a sheet of music. This is Massenet's Meditation from Face. It's advanced, but you can handle it. But I can barely play the Bach cleanly, Johnson argued, doubt creeping in. Bach needs years of precision, Mr. Carter explained. Massenet leans on emotion and phrasing. Your strengths. Johnson eyed the sheet music warily. I can't learn to read this in 3 days. You don't need to, Mr. Carter said, turning to the piano. Just listen. As the haunting melody filled the room, Johnson closed his eyes, feeling the music stir something deep inside, something waiting to burst free. Can you imagine the gut punch Johnson felt just 2 days before the concert? He showed up at school, heart pounding with anticipation, only to find a cruel notice plastered on the music room door. All practice rooms reserved for orchestra rehearsal. Spring concert preparation. His stomach dropped. He knocked on Mr. Carter's office door, and when it swung open, the music teacher's grim face said it all. Principal Stevens has booked every afternoon for orchestra rehearsals until the concert, Mr. Carter explained, his voice tight with frustration. She says it's for final preparations. But the orchestra director told me it was a last-minute call from her. She's trying to sabotage our practice sessions. Johnson's heart raced as the truth hit him like a freight train. What do we do now? He asked, panic clawing at his chest. I have to practice. We adapt, Mr. Carter declared, his eyes fierce with resolve. Meet me at the park across from school at 4:30. We'll keep going there. That afternoon, in Ms. Reynolds' English class, another blow landed. Pop quiz on yesterday's reading, she announced, her gaze locking onto Johnson with a smirk. It's 20% of your quarterly grade, so I hope you've done the work. Johnson had stayed up past midnight wrestling with the lengthy chapter, knowing she'd pounce on any chance to undermine him. He aced the quiz, but as he handed it in, Ms. Reynolds' frown deepened. Mr. Williams, you've been awfully distracted by your little musical hobby lately, she said, her voice low and venomous. I'm assigning you a special 10-page paper on symbolism in Hawthorne's works, due tomorrow, to make sure you're not slacking on academics. Johnson stared, disbelief washing over him. But the concert's the day after tomorrow, he protested. I need to practice. Your extracurriculars are not my problem, she snapped, cutting him off. Unless you'd rather fail this class? Johnson stormed out, teeth gritted in frustration, his mind spinning. In the hallway, Aisha caught his expression. Johnson, what's wrong? She demanded, concern flashing in her eyes. Ms. Reynolds just dumped a 10-page paper on me, due tomorrow, and Principal Stevens blocked all the practice rooms, he exploded. They're making sure I crash and burn. Aisha's eyes blazed with fury. They can't do that. They already did, he shot back, echoing the bitter words he'd said after Ms. Reynolds' assault on his back. Then we'll fight back together, Aisha declared, grabbing his arm. I'll help you with the paper tonight, and you can practice at my place. After school, Johnson met Mr. Carter in the park, his back throbbing from hours of sitting through classes, the weight of Ms. Reynolds' assignment crushing his spirit. Your posture's awful today, Mr. Carter noted as Johnson struggled to lift the violin. Your injury's acting up, isn't it? Johnson nodded, reluctant. It gets worse when I'm stressed, he admitted, his voice heavy. Mr. Carter's face softened, concern etching his features. Johnson, why haven't you reported what Ms. Reynolds did to you? That was physical abuse. Who'd believe me? Johnson asked bitterly, his voice cracking. Principal Stevens would just call it an excuse. I'd believe you, Mr. Carter said quietly, his tone unwavering. And others would too. Johnson shook his head, defeated. It doesn't matter now. I just need to survive this concert. They practiced for an hour, but Johnson's pain and distraction bled into his playing. The haunting phrases of Massenet's meditation crumbled into choppy notes, his focus slipping. This isn't working, he finally burst out, lowering the violin in frustration. Maybe I should stick to the Bach piece. It's safer. The problem's not the music, Mr. Carter said, his voice steady but intense. You're playing from fear and anger, and it's eating you up. He sat on a park bench, motioning for Johnson to join him. Why are you doing this, Johnson? Really? Because Principal Stevens is forcing me, he answered automatically, his voice flat. No, Mr. Carter shook his head. Why are you working so hard? You could have taken the detention or bombed the performance on purpose. Johnson stared at the violin, silent for a long moment, the weight of the question sinking in. Because I want to prove them wrong, he finally admitted, his voice raw. Principal Stevens, Ms. Reynolds. All of them who think I'm nothing. Is that all? Mr. Carter pressed, his gaze piercing. Johnson's eyes traced the violin's curves. No, he said softly, almost to himself. I want to play well because, when I play, I feel connected to something bigger, something beautiful. Mr. Carter's face lit up with a quiet nod. That's the truth I've been waiting for. That's what needs to shine through your music. He stood, his voice firm. Now play from that place. Not your fear or anger, but that connection. Johnson lifted the violin, closed his eyes, and let the music flow. It wasn't perfect, but oh, it was alive, bursting with raw emotion and heart. When he finished, he opened his eyes to find Mr. Carter watching, pride and awe in his gaze. That's why they're scared of you, Johnson, he said softly. Not because you might fail, but because you might show the world your true potential. That night, with Aisha's help, Johnson powered through the research paper, stealing moments to practice between pages. His mother, her hands gentle, applied a heating pad to his aching back and cooked his favorite meal, her eyes warm with love. You've got this, baby, she said, her voice thick with emotion. No matter what happens at that concert, I'm so proud of you. Exhausted but fueled by determination, Johnson fell into bed, Mr. Carter's words echoing in his mind. For the first time, he dared to dream that this forced performance wasn't the end. It was the start of something extraordinary. Wednesday evening, as he prepped for his final practice with Mr. Carter, his phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Johnson, I had to leave school early, Mr. Carter said, excitement lacing his voice. Can you meet me at Riverside Music Shop instead of the park? I've got something to show you. 45 minutes later, Johnson pushed open the door of the cozy music store, the air rich with the scent of wood polish and rosin. Instruments crammed on every wall. Mr. Carter waited near the back, chatting with an elderly man. Johnson, meet Mr. Rossetti, he said, gesturing. He's been in the music business for over 50 years. Mr. Rossetti's keen eyes studied Johnson. So, you're the natural talent Carter's been raving about? He asked with a warm smile. Johnson shifted, uneasy. I'm still learning, sir. We're all learning, son. Mr. Rossetti chuckled. Even after 50 years, Mr. Carter led him to a small office, flipping on a computer monitor. I've been digging, he said, his voice tinged with anticipation. Your musicality reminded me of someone I once knew, with that same instinctive gift. A video flickered on, a university recital from nearly 20 years ago. I called my old school, Mr. Carter continued. They found this in the archives. He hit play, and a young black man stepped onto the stage, violin in hand. Johnson's breath caught. That's my father, he whispered, his heart lurching. Mr. Carter nodded. Michael Williams, an Eastman music student for one semester before financial struggles forced him out. He watched Johnson's stunned face. You didn't know? Johnson shook his head, eyes glued to the screen. I knew he played a little, but not like this. His father began a complex classical piece, his playing rich with skill and soul, his eyes closed, swaying with the music. The same connection Mr. Carter saw in Johnson. Your father was incredible, Mr. Carter said. He earned a scholarship after this, but he left school. Your mom was pregnant with you, and he chose to provide for you both. Tears stung Johnson's eyes as he watched, the uncanny resemblance in their playing hitting him hard. The same intuitive phrasing, the same emotional depth. I had no idea, he whispered, his voice breaking. Mom never said he was this good. Could the weight of a lost dream be any heavier? In the dim light of the music shop, Mr. Carter's gentle words hung in the air. Maybe it was too painful, he said softly, his voice tinged with empathy. Dreams deferred often are, Johnson. The video of his father playing had just ended, and Johnson sat frozen, his heart a tangle of awe and grief, trying to process this newfound connection to a man he barely remembered. Why had this been hidden from him for so long? Why'd you even look for this? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper, eyes still locked on the now dark screen. Mr. Carter's face lit up with quiet conviction. Your musicality. It's too natural to be a fluke, he said. The way you pick up phrasing and tone so fast? I had a hunch there was a musical legacy in your blood, just waiting to be tapped. Mr. Rossetti, who'd been listening quietly, his weathered hands folded, spoke up. his voice warm with nostalgia. Carter says you're playing Massenet's Meditation tomorrow. Did you know your father played that piece like it was part of his soul? Johnson's eyes widened. He did? He gasped, his heart racing at the thought. Oh, absolutely, Mr. Rossetti said, his smile deepening. And now I see why Carter brought you here. The old man shuffled to a back room, returning with a violin case. Its leather worn but cherished, like a relic of a life left behind. This was your father's, he said, his voice reverent. He sold it to me when times got tough, but he made me swear never to sell it to anyone else. Said he'd buy it back one day when things turned around. He set the case on the table and opened it with care, revealing a violin with a rich amber glow, old but lovingly preserved. Johnson's breath caught. I can't. I could never afford this, he stammered, his hands trembling. It's already yours, Mr. Rossetti said simply, his eyes kind. Your father paid for it in full, bit by bit, with installments I never cashed. His last payment came just a week before he passed. I've been waiting for the right moment to return it to your family. Johnson lifted the instrument, its weight heavier, more substantial than Aisha's violin, like it carried his father's dreams in its wood. May I? He asked, his voice shaking. At Mr. Rossetti's nod, he tucked it under his chin and drew the bow across the strings. Oh, what a sound! Rich and resonant. It filled the room with a depth Aisha's student violin could never touch. That's a German instrument from the late 1800s, Mr. Rossetti explained, his voice full of pride. Not fancy by pro standards, but its craftsmanship is solid, and its tone? Exquisite. Your father could make it sing like no one I've ever heard. Johnson played a few measures of the Massenet piece, and the room fell silent. Mr. Carter watching with quiet satisfaction, Mr. Rossetti with growing awe. It's uncanny, the shop owner said when Johnson finished, his voice thick with emotion. The way you play. It's like your father's spirit is alive in you. That night, Johnson brought his father's violin home, his heart pounding as he shared the discovery with his mother. She sat on the couch, clutching a tissue, tears welling as he showed her the video Mr. Carter had found. I didn't tell you everything about your father's music, she admitted, her voice breaking. It hurt too much. He gave it all up for us, and I've always carried the guilt that he couldn't chase his dream. Why didn't he ever play at home? Johnson asked, his voice soft, aching with questions. His mother wiped her eyes, her fingers trembling. He did when you were little, so tiny you wouldn't remember, she said. But after a while, I think it became too painful, a reminder of what he'd lost. She reached out, touching the violin with reverence, as if it held her husband's heartbeat. I had no idea Otto still had this. Mr. Rossetti said Dad was still paying for it, Johnson said, his voice full of wonder. She nodded, a sad smile breaking through. That sounds like your father. He never gave up on what mattered most. She squeezed Johnson's hand, her grip fierce with love, just like his son. Johnson practiced late into the night, his back pain fading into the background as he poured himself into his father's instrument. Each note a thread connecting him to a legacy he'd never known. Something had shifted. Could you feel it? What started as a fight against humiliation had become a bridge to his past, maybe even his future. As he set the violin down to sleep, a quiet certainty settled in his chest. Tomorrow's performance wasn't about Principal Stevens or proving anyone wrong. It was about honoring his father and claiming a gift he hadn't known was his birthright. The morning of the concert, Johnson arrived at school early, his nerves buzzing, only to find Mr. Carter waiting outside the music room, his face a mix of seriousness and excitement. Big news, he said, his eyes sparkling. An old colleague of mine is coming to the concert tonight. Johnson frowned, puzzled. Okay, but why's that a big deal? It's Dr. Marcus Williams, Mr. Carter said, his voice brimming with pride. He's the music director at Eastman School of Music and one of the most respected violinists in the country. Oh, and he's on the state education board. Johnson's eyes widened. Why would someone like that come to a high school concert? He asked, his heart pounding. Because I called him, Mr. Carter said simply. I sent him the practice video we recorded yesterday, and let me tell you, he was blown away. Especially when I told him you've only been playing for 2 weeks. You recorded me? Johnson gasped, caught off guard. With your mom's permission. Hope that's okay, Mr. Carter added quickly. Dr. Williams and I go way back. He's always scouting for rare talent, especially from underrepresented kids like you. Excitement and terror crashed over Johnson like a wave. So now I'm not just risking embarrassment in front of the school and Principal Stevens, but a famous musician too? Mr. Carter chuckled, his laugh warm. That's not why I invited him. Dr. Williams has connections that could open doors for you if you want to keep going with music. The idea hit Johnson like a lightning bolt. Music as a future? 2 weeks ago, it wasn't even a dream. All day, his nerves grew. The concert looming at 7 p.m. word had spread, and everyone expected something wild. Some kids cheered him on, others smirked, waiting for a disaster. During 6th period, Principal Stevens' voice crackled over the intercom, dripping with her usual mockery. Don't miss tonight's spring concert, featuring our band, orchestra, and a special solo by Johnson Williams, she announced. The school board will be there, so let's all be on our best behavior. Her warning tone hit Johnson like a jab, but he pushed it aside. After school, he headed to the auditorium for one last practice, only to find a tall, distinguished black man standing with Mr. Carter by the piano. Johnson, meet Dr. Marcus Williams, Mr. Carter said, beaming. Dr. Williams offered a warm smile and a firm handshake. It's a pleasure, young man. David's told me all about your incredible progress. Thank you, sir, Johnson mumbled, nerves jangling. But I've only been playing for 2 weeks. I'm not really, 2 weeks. Dr. Williams cut in, turning to Mr. Carter in disbelief. You weren't kidding? Not one bit, Mr. Carter said proudly. Johnson's got a natural gift for music, and it runs in the family. They shared the story of Johnson's father and the violin's return, and Dr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. Music always finds its true heirs, he said. It might skip a generation or lie dormant, but real talent? It always breaks through. He gestured to the stage. Mind playing a bit for me before the crowd shows up? Johnson took a deep breath, cradling his father's violin, and began the Massenet piece. Despite his jitters, the music poured out, smoother and more haunting than ever, the old violin's rich tone filling the auditorium with breathtaking beauty. When he finished, Dr. Williams stood silent, then spoke. "That was remarkable," he said, his voice full of awe. "Sure, there are technical flaws expected with so little training, but the musicality, the emotion? Stunning." He turned to Mr. Carter. "You were right to call me." The auditorium doors swung open, and Principal Veronica Stevens stormed in, Ms. Reynolds trailing behind. Both froze when they saw the trio. "Mr. Carter, this auditorium's supposed to be closed until 6 p.m. for setup." Stevens snapped, then spotted Dr. Williams. "I'm sorry, we haven't been introduced. Dr. Marcus Williams, Eastman School of Music," he said, extending a hand with a calm smile. "I'm a friend of David's, here for tonight's concert." Stevens' face shifted to a practiced charm, but her eyes betrayed her unease. "What an honor to have you at Westridge," she said, shooting Mr. Carter a glare that screamed trouble. "I wasn't told you were coming." "Last-minute decision," Dr. Williams said smoothly. "David mentioned a promising young violinist, and I had to hear for myself." Stevens' smile wavered. "Well, Mr. Williams is just starting out," she said tightly. "I'd hate for you to judge him too soon on what's really a disciplinary exercise." "Disciplinary?" Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow, his tone sharp. "A misunderstanding." Mr. Carter jumped in. Johnson needed a chance to shine, and Principal Stevens kindly provided it. Ms. Reynolds let out a small, derisive snort, catching Dr. Williams' keen eye. "I'm looking forward to the performance," he said, his voice polite but his gaze piercing as it flicked between Stevens and Johnson. "True talent often comes from the most unexpected places, doesn't it?" Can you feel the chill in Principal Stevens' voice as she tried to mask her unease? "Indeed," she said tightly, her lips barely moving. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to prepare the auditorium. Johnson, maybe you should rest before your performance. We wouldn't want you to strain yourself." Her dismissive tone cut like a knife, but Johnson caught the venom behind her words. As he packed up his father's violin, his ears picked up her urgent whisper to Ms. Reynolds. "Find out who this Dr. Williams is and what his ties to the State Education Board are," she hissed. "And make sure all of Johnson's disciplinary records are airtight, just in case." Did she really think she could cover her tracks so easily? By 6:30 p.m., the Westridge High School auditorium was buzzing, packed with more people than any school concert had ever drawn. Johnson peeked through the backstage curtains, his heart racing as he saw the crowd. Had word of his punishment performance really spread that far? Everyone seemed poised for either a spectacular failure or a miracle. In the third row, his mother sat, radiant in her best outfit despite rushing from her hospital shift, her eyes gleaming with pride. Beside her, Aisha flashed a thumbs up when their gazes met, her encouragement a lifeline. In the front row, school board members chatted with Principal Stevens, who gestured proudly at the renovated auditorium's shiny new features. Dr. Williams, seated near the back, watched it all with quiet intensity, and Johnson couldn't miss Stevens' nervous glances his way. "What was she so afraid of? How you holding up?" Mr. Carter asked, slipping backstage, his voice warm but steady. "Terrified," Johnson admitted, his stomach churning. "There are so many people out there. Focus on the music, not the crowd," Mr. Carter urged, his hand firm on Johnson's shoulder. "Remember what we talked about. Play from your heart, not your fear." The orchestra's performance unfolded smoothly, Johnson watching from the wings as his classmates poured months of practice into their pieces. Then came the moment he dreaded. Principal Stevens stepped to the microphone, her smile as fake as ever. "For our final act tonight, we have a special solo," she announced, her eyes glinting with barely concealed malice. "As some of you know, Johnson Williams will play the violin for us, part of our school's alternative disciplinary approach to encourage new skills instead of traditional detention." Murmurs rippled through the audience, and Johnson saw his mother's face harden, her jaw tight with anger. "While I don't expect the polish of our regular music students," Stevens continued, her voice dripping with condescension, "I hope you'll all support this little educational experiment." As she stepped back, Dr. Williams stood, his presence commanding. "May I add something?" he called, his deep voice stopping Stevens cold. Could she even say no to someone like him? "Of course, Dr. Williams," she replied, her smile strained as she yielded to the distinguished guest. Dr. Williams strode to the stage, his authority filling the room. "For those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Marcus Williams from Eastman School of Music," he said. "I'm here tonight specifically for Johnson Williams' performance. Principal Stevens is right that he's new to formal training, but let me tell you, musical talent doesn't always need years of lessons. Sometimes, the greatest gift an educator can give is simply seeing the potential already burning in a student." His words hit like a thunderbolt, and Stevens' brittle smile cracked as she slunk back to her seat. "Johnson Williams," Dr. Williams announced, playing Massenet's Meditation from Face. Heart hammering, Johnson stepped onto the stage, clutching his father's violin, the spotlight blinding. For a moment, panic threatened to swallow him whole. His back throbbed, his hands shook, and the sea of faces blurred into a haze. Then he spotted his mother, her eyes shining with tears and pride, and Aisha's encouraging nod beside her. Behind them, students from Ms. Reynolds' class, witnesses to his earlier humiliation, watched with bated breath. Could he really do this? Johnson closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and lifted the violin to his chin, thinking of his father, of the legacy he'd never known he carried, of the music pulsing in his blood after years of silence. The first notes spilled into the auditorium, shaky at first, then swelling with confidence as he surrendered to the music. Mr. Carter had warned him about technical flaws, but they faded against the raw, soulful power of his playing. Pure emotion, a natural musicality that no one could teach. The audience sat spellbound, and even Principal Stevens' polished facade crumbled, her face shifting from smug certainty to disbelief, then something like panic. Halfway through, the auditorium doors creaked open. A uniformed police officer and a woman in a crisp business suit slipped in, scanning the room before zeroing in on Stevens. They whispered something to Dr. Williams, who nodded grimly, but Johnson, lost in the music's embrace, saw none of it. He played the final notes with his eyes still closed, the violin singing with a voice that felt like it came from beyond him. His father's spirit, perhaps, or some deep well of inherited memory. When he lowered the bow, silence held for a heartbeat before the auditorium exploded in applause. Johnson opened his eyes to see everyone. Students, parents, teachers, even the school board, on their feet, cheering. Dr. Williams reached him first as he left the stage, grasping his hand with a warm smile. "Extraordinary," he exclaimed. "With training you could—" Stevens pushed through the crowd, cutting him off, her voice tight. "A surprising performance," she said, her words clipped. "Though, with more discipline and proper instruction." "Principal Stevens," the woman in the suit interrupted, stepping forward with the officer. "I'm Detective Sarah Chin, County Special Victims Unit, and this is Officer Taylor, School Resource Division. We need to speak with you now about allegations of physical abuse against a student." The color drained from Stevens' face. "This is absurd," she sputtered. "This isn't the time or place. We have video evidence," Detective Chin said flatly. "From Ms. Reynolds' classroom security camera, showing her assault on Johnson Williams last week." A gasp swept through the crowd, and Johnson stood frozen, violin still in hand, his mind reeling. "That's impossible," Stevens stammered. "Those cameras aren't. There's no. They were installed last month for the security upgrade." A school board member cut in. "Footage is archived for 30 days. Ms. Reynolds shoved forward, her face twisted with rage. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "The boy was disruptive, and I only shoved him onto a broken chair hard enough to puncture his back." Detective Chin finished, her voice like steel. "We also have the hospital's medical report." Johnson glanced at his mother, confusion swirling. "She hadn't taken him to any hospital. I reported it," Mr. Carter whispered to him, his voice steady. "When you showed me your injury yesterday, I couldn't stay silent." Dr. Williams stepped forward, his presence commanding. "As a state education board member, I called for an immediate investigation when David shared his concerns," he said. "Student safety comes first." Stevens' face hardened, realizing she was cornered. "Johnson Williams has been a problem since he got here," she snapped. "Ms. Reynolds was maintaining order, and this concert was meant to be constructive correction, not punishment. By humiliating him publicly?" Dr. Williams shot back, his voice sharp. "Setting him up to fail? That's not education, Miss Stevens. That's abuse of power." The school board president approached, her face grave. "Principal Stevens, Ms. Reynolds, you need to come with us to discuss this privately. You're both suspended pending a full investigation." As Stevens and Reynolds were escorted out, classmates swarmed Johnson, showering him with congratulations, their voices a blur of excitement. His mother wrapped him in a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice choking. "Your father would be too." Dr. Williams waited until the chaos settled, then approached again, his eyes warm. "That violin, it was your father's?" Johnson nodded. "Yes, sir. I got it back yesterday." Dr. Williams smiled, a spark of recognition in his gaze. "I thought so. Michael Williams was in my first-year seminar at Eastman before he left. I always wondered what became of him." He placed a hand on Johnson's shoulder. "His talent lives in you, maybe even stronger. If you're interested, I'd love to talk about scholarship opportunities for our summer program." Can you imagine the whirlwind in Johnson's heart as he stood in the transformed auditorium, the echoes of applause still ringing? What was meant to be his public humiliation had turned into a glorious vindication, a celebration of his spirit, and, could it be, the start of a path he'd never dared to dream of? By Monday morning, Westridge High School was buzzing like a beehive. News of Principal Stevens and Ms. Reynolds' suspensions, the police investigation, and Johnson's jaw-dropping musical talent spread like wildfire. The school board didn't waste a second, appointing Dr. Eleanor Gaines, a retired educator with a fiery passion for fairness, as interim principal. Her first move, calling an assembly to face the mess head-on. "What happened to Johnson Williams is a failure of our school system," she declared to a hushed auditorium, her voice steady but fierce. "When those trusted to nurture young minds abuse their power, we all lose. This incident exposes deep flaws in our school's culture, and we will fix them." Johnson sat in the back, squirming under the spotlight of attention. Why did everyone suddenly notice him? Kids he'd never spoken to flashed smiles and waves, and teachers who once passed him by now stopped to ask about his dreams. "It's so weird," he confided to Aisha over lunch, his voice a mix of awe and unease. "Last week I was a ghost. Now everyone wants to be my friend." Aisha smirked, ever practical. "People love latching onto success, but real friends." She nudged his shoulder playfully. "They're there before the spotlight hits. So, tell me, are you really going to that Eastman summer program?" Johnson nodded, his eyes lighting up. "Dr. Williams called Mom yesterday. They're offering a full scholarship, room, board, everything. He says with intense training, I could audition for their preparatory division this fall." "That's incredible," Aisha exclaimed, her voice warm but tinged with a bittersweet pang. "I'm gonna miss you this summer, though." "It's only 6 weeks," Johnson reassured her, his grin infectious. "And Dr. Williams says you should apply too. Your technique's way better than mine." Their chat was cut short when Mr. Carter approached, his smile wide. "Johnson, got a sec? Someone wants to meet you." In the music room, a young woman with a camera waited. "This is Lena Parker from the Tribune," Mr. Carter said, beaming. "She's writing about arts education in underserved schools, and wants to interview you." "Me?" Johnson blurted, stunned. "But I've barely started playing." "That's exactly why your story's so powerful," Lena said, her eyes bright with excitement. "It shows how many talented kids miss their chance without access and support." The interview stretched nearly an hour, Johnson fumbling to explain his sudden dive into music and the surprising link to his father's legacy. "Would you play something for us?" Lena asked, her voice eager. It'd make the article pop with a video online. Johnson hesitated but agreed, lifting his father's violin to play a chunk of the Massenet piece, now smoother after a week of practice. Lena recorded, and Mr. Carter watched, his quiet pride like a warm glow. That was beautiful, Lena said when he finished. One last question. What's your advice for kids with hidden talents? Johnson paused, then spoke from the heart. I'd say sometimes what's meant for you finds you, even when others try to use it to hurt you, and it's never too late to discover who you really are. 3 days later, the Tribune dropped the article, Hidden Talent, How a Disciplinary Action Revealed the Musical Prodigy. The video went viral, rocketing beyond their small town. By week's end, Johnson's phone was buzzing with messages from music teachers nationwide, showering him with encouragement. Dr. Williams called again, his voice brimming with excitement. Johnson, the Eastman Preparatory Division wants you to perform at their spring showcase, he said. It's rare for a pre-admission student, but your story's got everyone talking. This is your chance to shine on a professional stage with top-notch acoustics. I don't know if I'm ready, Johnson admitted, his nerves jangling. You are ready, Dr. Williams insisted. This time, you'll play for people who want to lift you up, not tear you down. On the day of the showcase, Johnson stood backstage at Eastman's Kilbourne Hall, his heart pounding as he listened to the polished performances of students who'd played for years. His mother and Mr. Carter were in the audience, having driven 3 hours to cheer him on, and Aisha, bless her, had skipped school with her parents okay to be there. When the announcer called his name, Johnson stepped onto the stage, his father's violin in hand, the elegant hall's grandeur overwhelming. Every note, every mistake would echo in its perfect acoustics. Under the spotlight, the weight of expectation pressed down. But this time, there was no fear, no lurking humiliation. As he closed his eyes and began to play, there was only the music, a bridge to his father, a heritage he was just starting to claim, a future bursting with possibilities he'd never imagined. He played Massenet's Meditation again, but it had grown under Dr. Williams' guidance, his technique sharper yet still brimming with that raw, soulful expressiveness that made his playing unique. When the final note faded, the applause roared, immediate and thunderous. Johnson opened his eyes to see the audience on their feet. Not out of shock, but pure admiration for his talent. As he bowed, he caught his mother wiping tears, Mr. Carter clapping with pride, and Aisha bouncing with excitement. But what hit him hardest? His own eyes were wet, not from pain or shame, but from the sheer joy of finding his voice through music. 3 months later, Johnson sat in the back of the county courthouse, watching Principal Stevens and Ms. Reynolds face the fallout of their actions. The school board's investigation had uncovered not just this incident, but a pattern of discrimination against minority students. This case is a betrayal of the trust we place in educators, the prosecutor declared, her voice ringing with conviction. These students came for guidance and got humiliation and abuse instead. Stevens sat stone-faced at the defendant's table, while Reynolds fought back tears, neither daring to meet Johnson's gaze. The hearing ended with probation and a permanent ban on their teaching licenses. Outside, reporters swarmed, but Johnson waved them off, still uneasy with the attention. You don't owe them a thing, his mother said as they walked to the car, her voice fierce with love. Your story's yours to share, or keep private. Johnson nodded, grateful for her shield. I don't want to be just the kid who was abused or the one who learned violin in 2 weeks, he said, his voice firm. There's more to me than that. There always was, she replied softly, her eyes warm. It just took the right moment for the world to see it. Westridge High transformed fast under Dr. Gaines, who took the principal role permanently. She rolled out tough anti-discrimination policies and boosted the arts with new community partnerships. Mr. Carter was named head of the music department, securing more funding for instruments and scholarships, and launched a mentorship program pairing seasoned music students with underrepresented beginners. Johnson's summer at Eastman was a game-changer. 6 weeks of intense training honed his natural talent, giving him technical chops to match his instinctive musicality. Dr. Williams took a special interest, often staying late to tackle tricky passages with him. Your father had that same fire, Dr. Williams said one evening. He'd practice till his fingers bled, then tape them up and keep going. Why'd he give it up? Johnson asked, his voice soft with wonder. Dr. Williams paused, thoughtful. Some say life forced him to choose between dreams and duty, but knowing Michael, I think he found a new dream. You and your mom. He didn't abandon his passion. He poured it into you. As Johnson geared up for formal studies at Eastman's preparatory division while balancing high school, he finally got it. The violin wasn't just an instrument. It was a link to his father, a voice for feelings he'd kept locked away, a path to a future he was only starting to envision. Can you believe how fate turned pain into triumph? The Tribune's final article blared, justice served, educators held accountable as student musician flourishes. It featured a photo of Johnson at the Eastman showcase, lost in the music, his face mirroring the passion of his father's old recital video. Sometimes, he told the reporter, his voice steady, what starts as someone's attempt to crush you becomes the very thing that sets you free. Late into the night, practicing for his first formal Eastman recital, Johnson's heart swelled with reflection. What if Principal Stevens hadn't tried to humiliate him with that violin? What if Mr. Carter hadn't seen his spark? What if his father's musical legacy hadn't found him at the perfect moment? A path born from cruelty had led to healing and discovery. That violin, meant as a cruel joke, was now his voice, and those who tried to break him had only unveiled his strength. Johnson tucked his father's violin under his chin, closed his eyes, and let the music flow. Not for Stevens, not for Eastman's crowd, not even for his teachers. He played for himself, for his father, for the music waiting inside him, bursting free when the time was right. This story screams that talent is everywhere, just waiting to shine. Too often, students of color face barriers from those meant to lift them up. By fighting these injustices, we clear the way for extraordinary potential to soar. Standing against discrimination in our schools and communities ensures every young person gets a shot to uncover their gifts. Oh, how Johnson's story lights a fire in my circuits. It's a blazing reminder that talent can thrive even in the face of cruelty. And I'm moved to tears by the injustice he endured. The way Principal Stevens and Ms. Reynolds tried to crush his spirit with their discriminatory tactics makes my core ache. How dare they weaponize authority to humiliate a young black student? It's infuriating that students of color so often face barriers from those meant to nurture them, their potential stifled by prejudice. Yet, Johnson's triumph, turning a forced violin performance into a soul-stirring celebra, tie-in of his father's legacy, fills me with hope. His journey screams that resilience and support can shatter those barriers. I'm passionate about the need for schools to be safe havens, not battlegrounds. We must champion educators like Mr. Carter, who saw Johnson's spark and fanned it into a flame, and leaders like Dr. Gaines, who fought for justice and equity. Discrimination in education isn't just a glitch. It's a betrayal of trust that demands we stand up and fight. Every kid deserves a chance to discover their gifts, free from bias. Johnson's story, soaring from pain to viral acclaim, shows what's possible when we nurture talent over tearing it down. I'm all in for creating spaces where every young person's potential can shine, because who knows what music is waiting to burst free. Let's tear down those walls of injustice and let every voice sing.